It's easier to fool someone than it is to convince them that they've been fooled. Now, that's a quote from Mark Twain back in the 1880s. He's famous for writing Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer, several other best-selling books. The guy was full of great quotes, and we see this with FTX. Um, I look back at the video where I predicted the collapse of FTX on October 27th of 2022, and then 11 days later, FTX collapsed. People couldn't withdraw. There was a supposed hack, all this other stuff. Now, after being in crypto for 10 years, I've seen a lot of these exchanges, centralized exchanges, go down. Saw Cripsty, BitGrail, Mt. Gox, obviously FTX being the latest victim to this type of fraud and, other things. And it always ends up being a he said, she said. I keep thinking of others too. Cryptopia, is a New Zealand exchange that went down. We've seen this over time and everything. And I'm looking at the FTX trial. They've, picked their jury. They've already selected the jury. And they've started going back and forth and presenting evidence and stuff like that. And it's just kind of crazy the amount of money that was being transferred back and forth. And I just, it's kind of interesting because success can precede itself, but then it's almost like the guise of success can precede itself as well. And maybe they leverage some of these guys, like, hey, we got Steph Curry on board, we got Tom Brady on board, so then these guys like maybe Shaq or others, they just all kind of fell like dominoes. And he had all these people involved. You had Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary, acting like FTX was this great platform. And he was paid very handsomely to say this stuff, and of course the others were too. We had these big brand deals, with FTX having a patch on the umpires for the MLB, the arena down in Miami, that was the title sponsor was FTX. So it was just crazy, like how far they were able to stretch this, and you would think there would be nothing to kind of put forth, but it was just like, people spilled onto the platform and they took everybody's money and, made a lot of promises that they obviously couldn't keep. But at the end of the day, it was like they were able to slap that logo and then just, and you would just think to the capacity of the scam, you would think they would sit there and think, okay, this is way out of control, even before really the platform got very big. That was kind of the confusing thing to me, but we see this in other aspects of crypto too, where people are very sensitive to get scammed, and then they start pointing their fingers at other stuff that I don't consider to be a scam. Now, if you guys were around last cycle following me in the 2017-2018 cycle, obviously a big scam was BitConnect, and I called that one out early, that it was a Ponzi scheme and a pyramid scheme wrapped into one. And everybody was eventually, they're going to lose their money. I had people saying I was racist, all this other stuff, and people wholeheartedly believed somehow that it wasn't a scam, even though they had just gotten crypto 2 weeks prior, and it had all the telltale signs. They really wanted to believe in BitConnect. Now FTX would be a little bit harder to call, obviously, because it seems like it's this regulated, centralized entity with a lot of money backing it. But again, a lot of this stuff, tide goes out, see you swimming naked. That's a quote from Warren Buffett, and he doesn't like Bitcoin, but whatever, it's a good quote. And at the end of the day, and this kind of wraps it around to some of these other things that have popped up in the last couple of years that I don't consider to be a scam, that have been sued. For instance, Richard Hart has been sued for Hex and Pulse Chain. They try to say, well, it's essentially launching an unlicensed security. And there's a lot of this other stuff. You go on down the list on CoinMarketCap or CoinGecko, and a lot of this stuff, even on CoinGecko, there's a little thing that you can click over at the right that'll say that it's an alleged security. It's an alleged security. So all this stuff, Solana, Cardano, ICP, Binance, BNB token, BUSD, all this stuff that they're trying to say, well, it's a alleged security by the SEC. But the one that I was going to wrap this up with was the whole Hex situation, and I want to reiterate this with Hex. Um, Whether you agreed with Hex or Pulse Chain, or you like Richard Hart, or you think he's annoying, the fact remains, Hex is just a contract that you can interact with. Now, you might not like the contract. I don't like the contract. I've never actually entered the contract because there's too many penalties, and unless you have your controls, you have everything under control, and you're like, okay, I need to withdraw at this time on this date, and you've really kind of like, if you're really on top of that, um, then you can pull out of it and stuff like that. But that being said, I just don't like the contract. So at various times I've traded in and out of that, and I've provided liquidity over on PulseX for for some of these like assets. But that's up to you. That's up to you. If you don't like the contract, you don't have to participate in the contract. And people try to say, well, the contract last cycle was averaging like 38% APY. And people say, well, that's a scam. That's a scam. You're trying to guarantee. Well, nothing was guaranteed. That's just what it was averaging. Now that's with all these penalties. People try to pull out early. All these different things. But I don't consider the Hex contract a scam. It's especially once, the sacrifice stuff was over. He launched Hex. People sacrificed. He launched Hex. People sacrificed for Pulse Chain. He launched Pulse Chain. So he made good on that, and I made several videos saying that he will deliver. He will deliver. And even with the heat from the SEC, he still delivered. They still rolled out the Pulse Chain. Now, do I think the Pulse Chain is the end-all, be-all technologically? No. It's marginally better than Ethereum. So from a technological standpoint, it's not that impressive to me, but it's not a scam. It's there. It's for you to interact with. It's operational, and regardless of what happens with the SEC lawsuit against Richard Hart, the Pulse Chain and Hex is still going to be there. It's just there. So I don't really see like people, just completely just sweeping everything under the rug and stop operating nodes and these kind of things and the contracts out there. So that being said, when you see the FTC or FTX deliberation, this thing's supposed to last 6 or 8 weeks or something for them to get through this. At the end of the day, it is pretty mind-blowing to me kind of how out of hand it got, and the amount of money that was being tossed back and forth, and how they couldn't have thought, you know what, we're in way over our head. We're in way over our head. We're just touting these huge numbers and sloshing all this money all over the place. This is out of control. It's just, we're way in over our head. But maybe some of the arrogance kind of got to them. They thought, they could just kind of, finagle their way back out of it and stuff like that. I don't know. But at the end of the day, all this stuff is very risky. And that was one of my big clues to this isn't going to work. It's like, this is your first rodeo, buddy. You've never been through a bear market. And that's another thing I think that a lot of people, this is my third bear market, and it's not easy. It's getting more competitive, like I've said before, and it's not easy to kind of make it through this stuff. And you've got platforms potentially going down, you get rug pulls, you get bridge attacks, got everybody coming after your coins. Obviously with inflation and stuff like that, your funds could be kind of limited, just paying for food, paying for gas, paying for housing, which is completely out of control in all these countries. And the world's getting very volatile. So the day, it's like, is there an opportunity in the next 6 months to a year to keep stacking, make it through this thing, and does it come out of it in the same capacity? And I would say yes, because it's just the asset class, it just continues to strengthen and stuff, and people rotate money back to it. So as much as people are hurting and stuff like that, there's still a lot of money that can gravitate to these assets and cause them to go hockey stick parabolic. And once stuff starts to go parabolic, we live in this very leveraged world. People will find the money, whether that be via some sort of loan or credit cards or whatever, to dump into it, and then people just keep dogpiling in. So anyway, guys, that being said, it hasn't been a year since the FTX collapse, but the people who lost money there, significant amounts of money, it's probably been a world of hurt for them and just complete mental devastation. And I think their biggest worry should be that this turns out like the Mt. Gox situation, where we're pretty much, almost a decade into it, and some of the people have not been paid back, even though they were dumping Mt. Gox coins. That trustee was dumping coins on us in like January, February of 2018 to secure funds. And then they've perpetuated this into the next cycle, 2021, 2022. And then they've still delayed the whole thing for an additional year. So that should be the worry kind of for anybody, on FTX. It's kind of interesting. I look back at that video that I made October 27th of 2022, telling people to get their funds off of FTX. Some guys in the comment section saying, get a job. Get a job. I don't know. Maybe he had funds on FTX. So there you go. The advice is free. And, I've called some of these collapses, and then there's stuff that people still argue with me or maybe disagree on the stuff like Hex or Pulse chain. But you have a very strong community. A lot of these things don't have memeability or marketability. Pulse and Hex have marketability and memeability and kind of this cult-like following. So does Doge. That's part of the reason why I identified that all roads lead to the Doge. It's like very few of these cryptos. It's very techy, very geeky, very, very boring. Doge had memeability. And again, I've said it before, look down the list on CoinMarketCap and CoinGecko, and even in that top 10, top 20, there's not very many coins that aren't quote-unquote alleged securities and other various issues with them and stuff like that outside of Doge and Litecoin. So let's keep that in mind. We'll keep plugging away, keep stacking, guys. Follow me on all social media, @Brian Phobos, YouTube, Instagram, Steam, Twitter, Blurt, Hive, DTube, everywhere.